Here's Brody Brazil.
Oh, hey, look, it's Pierre LeBrun. We'll get to him in just a second. Good guy, by the way. Got to know him over the course of covering many Sharks playoffs over the years. But first, what he said on TSN's Insider Trading back on Thursday night. Quote, "In talking with other teams around the league, the Sharks have let it be known that they're willing to listen on pretty much every player on their roster, other than perhaps Tomas Hertl, who just signed an 8-year extension last year." He went on to say the Sharks' payroll and roster right now has a bunch of guys, led by the likes of Erik Karlsson, with full no-move clauses. It's going to be difficult for Mike Grier to enact the kind of change that he wants, but that's his intention over the next couple years. That's a lot. There's so many things to react to, but that's what I'll do here kind of one by one. And first off, I told you, I'd tell you about Pierre. Not just a good guy, but a reputable source. Somebody you can trust. Somebody who is very well connected, prominent among NHL, not only breaking news, but emerging and developing news. He's got a lot of sources, and he's not the type of person at all, ever, to make up things or exaggerate things or fabricate things. Now, it doesn't mean 100% of the time he's always been right, because sometimes something is said, he'll report it, and then whoever said it changes their mind and does something else. But the bottom line is, if it comes from Pierre LeBrun and said like that, I mean, you got to put a lot of weight into everything that goes with it. I think it's interesting that other teams are saying this, and that's kind of the way he phrases it. Other teams are leading him to believe that this is the Sharks' intent, to put everybody, minus Tomas Hertl, we'll get to that in a second, everybody basically on the trade table. It's interesting because the Sharks wouldn't necessarily outright say this. It might be their mindset internally, but I don't know that they gain anything by being the ones to publicize or promote this. So let it be clear, as you hear what Pierre said or read what Pierre said, understand that this may be originally coming from the Sharks, but it's only being publicized through other teams. I just think that's an important consideration as you look at the bigger picture here. But none of this, right, is a secret. It's not a surprise to anybody. When you change your head coach, when you change your general manager, when you change so many people inside your hockey operations staff, when you trade Brent Burns, I mean, everybody's guard should go up that change is afoot in San Jose. How much can you change? How limited are the Sharks by certain contracts and clauses? I mean, they got fairly established with their core of players a handful of years ago. So now to unravel some of that, not going to be the easiest thing in the world. But again, it's all about evolution, change, a next chapter, a focus towards the future, and that kind of leaves the present a little bit up in the air in terms of what might happen. But again, none of this should be a complete surprise. Like, to hear this, I think what it is hearing it said kind of perks your ears up to go, whoa. I mean, that's, if true, and if that really is the mentality, and if there's a lot of moves made because of that mentality, wow, okay, we're about to see it happen here. We're about to see, the Sharks do a wholesale flip. But at the same time, I think you let it sink in, and you're really not surprised by it, considering where they've been, where they're trying to go, what their pipeline looks like, and maybe what kind of draft pick they'll be able to get this upcoming summer. But I think the timing is interesting for this to come out. If we were past Christmas or into the new year and only weeks away from the deadline, okay, that's when trade talks and moves across the league really heat up. And I don't mean just the Sharks trying to move on from their players. I'm talking about, are other teams right now really interested in acquiring new players? We're like 10 games into the season. Is there really a huge market for movement right now by anybody? I mean, there are some really good teams that have struggled out of the gate, but does that mean that they're going to hit the panic button? They're going to try and reshuffle their roster and add some Sharks players because they think that'll make the difference? I I hesitate to believe that any of the maneuvers that the Sharks would want to make will happen sooner than later. I'm not saying they won't happen. It just feels like more of a closer to the deadline situation or trade out of injury necessity situation. I just don't think right here and right now is the time where movement is actually going to happen. The other thing that's worth some deeper thought is the fact that Tomas Hertl was singled out, isolated from the rest of the group by saying maybe he's not on the table versus everybody else who is, and that puts everybody in a weird category because potentially they are on the trading block and there are no attachments to them, but there is some to him. But then it makes him in a weird spot because he's not part of the rest of the group, and it's very segmented and divided. And again, I don't think any of this is intentional. I don't think any of this directly comes from the Sharks. I doubt any of it was specifically mentioned, maybe suggested, right? Maybe not even specifically detailed. But it is kind of curious that one player's name was mentioned as not being tradable versus everybody else who is. Now, I don't know if that's truly because of the long-term contract. Maybe the Sharks also figure that they need some kind of foundation through this transition, and that's the player they want to keep as their guy to bridge the gap. I'm not really sure. I don't think it came from the Sharks. I think it did come up somewhere. Again, this is Pierre LeBrun's reporting, so nothing was made up from scratch. Nothing was pulled out of thin air. But it is an interesting dynamic that Tomas in that mix, and yeah, certainly makes sense, the 8-year deal, and maybe not a lot of teams could even take that on. But there are other Sharks under long-term contracts still, so what's the difference between 4 and 5 years versus 8? I don't know, but yeah, I found that interesting. Not saying it's not true, I just found it interesting. Another reaction here is that the Sharks are truly into the full rebuild, right? Like in case it wasn't obvious, to change your hockey operations staff and your front office and your coaching staff and to throw in new jerseys and try and, give the brand a new feel, to keep the Barracuda, I don't want to say their own separate entity, but to put all those pipeline players on that team and keep them there and isolate them from the Sharks right now, it lets you think that there is some trust in the next wave. There is some hope for the next wave. There is some promise with that group of players, and they want to add to it. You'd certainly think that anybody that gets traded away from the Sharks this year, right? What's the return? I highly doubt that it's more veteran NHL players. If anything, it's prospects and draft picks and maybe younger NHL players. Like, they are planning for the future right now. And that makes now a bit exciting because you get what you get and you can kind of see things launch from the beginning. But it also obviously makes 2 and 3 years down the road pretty exciting when all of this young talent pans out. So I think, again, when you look at what the Sharks would be returning in some of these trades, plus the message that anybody is tradable right now, even some of the younger players on the Sharks team, it does kind of equate to the fact that the rebuild is full scale. And then the last thing here is, as much as we've discussed trading people in this video, and I hate going down that road. I hate to speculate. I hate to suggest things. I don't even like to name names. You've noticed I haven't said a single player's name in this video because it bugs me that I'd be the one here, suggesting somebody out the door. That's not true. And so, yeah, that's a pretty strong quote, right? That every Sharks player is on the trade table minus Tomas Hertl. But the reality is, how much movement can you actually have with some of these contractual limitations, the no move and the no trade clauses? So we really need to, temper ourselves from a strong comment or a strong report versus what's most likely to actually happen, like in the rest of this regular season. There you go. None of that's my reporting. In fact, a lot of this is just my speculation and my analysis of the report. But that's kind of what I make of it. So let me know what you think about all this in the comments section below.